The leaders of South Korea and Japan agreed to turn the page on years of frictions and move forward. The two refreshed their security cooperation by fully normalizing the military intel sharing pact and plan to visit each other's country for regular top-level talks. And the two leaders' efforts to improve Seoul-Tokyo ties broaden to closing down their long trade dispute. Tokyo gets rid of export curbs on chip materials, and Seoul pulls back its complaint to the WTO. The European Central Bank goes ahead with a planned half a percentage point rise in interest rates, despite uncertainties over the recent financial turmoil. Meanwhile, the U.S. tries to reassure its people that the American banking system is safe and sound. The leaders of South Korea and Japan are to build ties that look toward the future, based on security and economic cooperation. President Yoon and Japanese Prime Minister Yoon-Kishida on Thursday declared various measures to achieve just that. Our Presidential Office correspondent Oh Soo-young reports from Tokyo.
South Korea and Japan took major steps on Thursday to normalize their relations in security and trade, and move towards a partnership that looks to the future.
한국과 일본은 자유, 인권, 법치의 보편적 가치를 공유하고 안보, 경제, 글로벌 어젠다에서 공동의 이익을 추구하는 가장 가까운 이웃이자 협력해야 할 파트너입니다.
In the joint press conference after their summit, President Yoon and Japanese Prime Minister Kishida said Japan that day had ended its 2019 export curbs on 3 key materials used in South Korea's major tech products. Yoon said Seoul had also dropped its complaint against Tokyo's export policy to the World Trade Organization. The two neighbors' relations hit a critical low some 4 years ago over unresolved disputes and sentiments over historical issues, primarily the issue of compensating Koreans who were subjected to forced labor by Japanese firms before and during World War II.
Under the strong leadership of President Yoon, I am aware measures were announced to pay the settlements through a Korean foundation. With the implementation of the measures, I expect bilateral ties will progress more vigorously in a wide range of fields such as politics, the economy and culture.
To close the book on their trade war, the two sides will continue to hold talks to reinstate each other as trusted trade partners on their respective whitelists. On that note, they have also agreed to revive defense dialogues and establish economic security talks between Seoul and Tokyo, as well as seek trilateral dialogue with China. Another key move was fully restoring the bilateral military intel sharing pact, considered vital in joint efforts to counter North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. This comes as Seoul and Tokyo move to bolster their cooperation with Washington to deter Pyongyang and address growing regional and economic challenges in the Indo-Pacific region. The Yoon-Kishida summit is seen as a key stepping stone to such efforts, overcoming historical sticking points by building mutual trust, creating the base for greater governmental, business and civilian exchanges. Building on their breakthrough summit on Thursday, both Yoon and Kishida expressed their willingness to engage in active diplomacy, meeting whenever necessary without being constrained by formalities. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Tokyo.
Ahead of the summit with the Japanese Prime Minister, President Yoon also took his time to meet with Korean Japanese people in Tokyo, calling them the strongest support for the bilateral ties. Yoon's day 2 in Tokyo will focus on promoting civilian exchanges. Our Kim Do-yeon, traveling with the president, has the details.
Besides from the diplomatic ties and trade disputes that President Yoon wanted to settle through his trip to Japan, he also wanted to foster civilian exchanges. And as he went to lunch with 130 Korean Japanese and Korean nationals in Japan, his first official schedule in Tokyo, he called them the strongest support for the South Korea-Japan relationship and asked for their help.
자부심과 자긍심을 잃지 않고 각자 분야에서 활약하시는 동포 여러분 덕분에 일본 내 한국의 위상도 크게 향상됐습니다. 달라진 위상에 걸맞는 미래지향적인 한일 관계를 위해 여러분들께서 더 큰 역할을 해 주실 것이라고 믿습니다.
In fact, on his second and last day, the schedule will focus on promoting civilian exchanges. He's set to meet with business leaders of Japan, and this meeting comes as the two countries are starting to normalize their trade relations and pursue greater economic cooperation. There will also be 12 of business leaders of South Korea joining Yoon during this meeting. Many of them had faced some hurdles as Japan put export curbs on South Korean companies, but now, with the announcement that they've been lifted, it will be easier for them to do business with Japanese firms. Just before he leaves in the late afternoon, Yoon will also visit a local university to meet with students and academics. He will be giving a special lecture, and while not much has been shared on the topic, local media suspects the message will focus on the future generations' exchanges between the two countries. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News, Tokyo.
Now, the summit talks were not just of interest to Seoul and Tokyo. Foreign media outlets have also shed light on the Yoon-Kishida meetup, some seeing it as an opportunity and a new chapter in security cooperation, while others voiced skepticism about potential results. Our Lee Dae-yeon reports.
Following the South Korea-Japan summit, news outlets across the globe assessed South Korea and Japan as having opened up a new chapter in bilateral relations amid regional threats from North Korea and China. After the summit, Reuters reported that the remarks from the leaders of the two countries show how North Korea's missile launches and China's expanding engagement globally have contributed to the two countries mending ties. Germany's DPA also attributed cooperation between the two countries as coming as a result of the challenges posed by North Korea and China. France's international news agency AFP provided a recap of past disputes between South Korea and Japan, while also mentioning how President Yoon Suk-yeol has been working to overcome a century of difficult history and respond to regional crises by cooperating with Japan. It also reported the U.S. appears to have worked intensively to ensure the summit took place, adding that Washington welcomes better South Korea-Japan ties as feuding over historical issues has undermined the U.S. push to reinforce its alliances in Asia. That was also mentioned by some other media outlets in the U.S., which assessed the summit as strengthening trilateral ties between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan. The New York Times highlighted the importance of security ties between Seoul and Tokyo as it says that China's rising ambitions threaten to alter the balance of power in Asia. According to the Washington Post, all eyes are fixed on whether or not disputes arising from the Japanese colonization of the Korean peninsula during World War II can be resolved. Meanwhile, Japanese media welcomed President Yoon's visit to Japan. NHK provided some biographical information on Yoon while also reporting the popularity of the Japanese animated movie Slam Dunk and the Japanese whiskey highball boom in South Korea. The Yomiuri Shimbun had a similar tone, with the meeting among its top stories where it called the first summit in Japan between South Korean and Japanese leaders in 12 years an effort to roll out proactive economic cooperation. On the other hand, Chinese outlets were more skeptical about the potential results. Citing an expert, the state-run newspaper Global Times said it would be difficult to thaw icy bilateral ties between Seoul and Tokyo and that hostility between the two countries may even grow. It also pointed the finger at Washington, adding that President Yoon should be aware of satisfying the needs of the U.S. and Japan. Lee Dae-yeon, Arirang News.
More details are out on North Korea's launch on Thursday of an intercontinental ballistic missile. As widely presumed, Thursday's launch was a Hwasong-17 ICBM, the regime's largest nuclear-capable missile to date. The regime state media reported Friday that the leader Kim Jong-un oversaw the test firing and expressed great satisfaction. There, he called for enhancing deterrence against a nuclear war and giving a sense of fear to the North's enemies. Pyongyang's series of missile provocations this week is widely seen as a show of unhappiness against Seoul's trilateral security cooperation with the U.S. and Japan, coming on the day of the Seoul-Tokyo summit. Pyongyang said on Thursday that the ICBM launch was a response to the, quote, threat from the ongoing Seoul-Washington joint drills. On to the latest on the aerial collision between the U.S. and Russia. The U.S.-European command on Thursday released footage from the U.S. spy drone that shows the mid-air encounter, which the Pentagon said lasted between 30 and 40 minutes. The footage showed a Russian fighter jet dumping fuel as it intercepts the U.S. drone before it apparently collides with the MQ-9 Reaper drone. Despite releasing the video, the Biden administration says it will not take action against Russia, which, according to a Pentagon spokesperson, is an effort to de-escalate tensions. Moscow on Wednesday says relations between the two countries are at their lowest point following the latest incident and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The European Central Bank goes ahead with a planned 0.5 percentage point rise in interest rates, despite uncertainties over the recent financial turmoil. Meanwhile, the U.S. tries to reassure its people that the American banking system is safe and sound. Our Lee Sin-ja has more.
Despite expectations that the European Central Bank would take a smaller step when raising its key interest rates due to the uncertainty surrounding Credit Suisse and the fallout from bank failures in the U.S., it announced Thursday that it would still be making a big step of 50 basis points. The decision comes as ECB President Christine Lagarde stressed the need to continue to fight inflation in the Eurozone.
Inflation is projected to remain too high for too long. Therefore, the Governing Council today decided to increase the three key ECB interest rates by 50 basis points, in line with our determination to ensure the timely return of inflation to our 2% medium-term target.
The move by the ECB, which has been raising its rates at the fastest pace on record, will now see the 20 countries in the Eurozone raise their main lending rates to 3.5%. Meanwhile, speaking to the Senate Finance Committee on Thursday, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says the nation's banking system remains sound and Americans can feel confident about their deposits.
I can reassure the members of the committee that our banking system is sound and that Americans can feel confident that their deposits will be there when they need them. This week's actions demonstrate our resolute commitment to ensure that our financial system remains strong and that depositors' savings remain safe.
Her latest remarks come amid the recent collapse of Silicon Valley Bank in California and Signature Bank in New York. Yellen also stressed that taxpayers will not bear the cost of protecting uninsured money at the two failed regional banks. Meanwhile, Credit Suisse shares rebounded sharply on Thursday after announcing that it would borrow up to $54 billion from its central bank. Concerns had escalated after the Swiss lending bank's stock prices began plunging on Wednesday, prompting stock markets to fall in the U.S. and around the world. And now, San Francisco-based First Republic Bank is set to receive a $30 billion loan from a group of America's largest banks. The U.S. Treasury Department raised the support from the larger banks, saying it shows the resilience of the banking system. Trading of First Republic Bank stocks, which was halted several times on Thursday due to volatility, ended the day up more than 10% on the news of the $30 billion worth of assistance. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korean drama The Glory Part 2 continues to top the global Netflix charts, returning with powerful messages and attracting an even bigger audience from around the world. The successful comeback is even more notable given that such a feat is rare for a K-drama. For more on this, we're joined by Mr. Pierce Conran, a film critic based here in Seoul. Welcome back to the program.
Good morning. Thanks for having me back.
Korean dramas are being released as a multiple series, which is a new trend for K-content. This is the case for The Glory. Now, why do you think episodes are being released in seasons or parts like this all of a sudden?
Well, I think there's a few reasons for it. Obviously, we have noticed the popularity of Korean content around the world, and we can imagine this is a way of trying to capitalize on that. Now, there are kind of two models of K-dramas at this point. There's the traditional model, which involves shows dropping 2 episodes per week on broadcast channels or cable channels, and they run for 12, 16, or 20 episodes. But the other model is the streaming model, where shows are being released on Netflix and the like, and on some of those services, the shows drop at the same time. But if you're going to drop 12 or 16 episodes in one go, that doesn't really make sense. So the more traditional K-drama doesn't necessarily fit into the streaming model. But if you split it into two parts, that works more easily. So even if you're watching The Glory, for example, and you tuned in last Friday for episode 1 of part 2, it does say episode 9. So it really is, you can consider it more a 16-episode split in two. But this also follows a model of Netflix shows where the Money Heist shows, there's the Korean one, but the previous ones were also in 2 parts. And Stranger Things Season 4 was also dropped in 2 parts. People are wondering if the Netflix model, dropping everything at the same time, is the best way to go.
Right. Then, as a film critic yourself, do you think K-content coming out with a more than one part or series is a good strategy to attract a bigger audience, or is it better for us, the audience?
Well, I think certainly in the case of The Glory, it's been extremely successful. This is a show that opened at the end of December, and during its first weekend, it had about 25 million hours viewed. That's the metric that Netflix uses these days. And then, it grew over a few weeks, but then part 2 just dropped, and that opened up 125 million. So that's a 5-fold increase. Clearly, people responded to the show. People talked about it. And in that brief two and a half month interim between the different parts, something happened. So this does work with certain shows, certainly shows that are, that audiences are going to like. How about other shows? I'm not so sure. There have been quite a few now that have done this. We've had Big Bet on Disney. We've had Decoy on Coupang Play. We've had Island, which is TVing in Korea, and Amazon Prime Video internationally, and none of those seem to have done very well. We don't have the same transparency. We don't know the data, but they don't seem to have done extremely well. But for shows, I think it is very useful for global viewers who are not necessarily as aware of Korean content when it's coming out. So a show like The Glory, people in Korea know about it coming out. Song Hye-kyo is a massive local star. So people were excited about it, and had it been shown all at the same go, or just shown week to week on a traditional cable channel, I'm sure it would have been equally successful. But for an international audience, it would have been a bit different. So the first season the first part gave a chance for it to kind of, go through particularly Asia and also Latin America, and kind of get people excited, talk to their friends about it. And by the time season 2 or part 2 arrived, more people are aware about it, and we have this massive knock-on effect.
Right, and like you mentioned, figures surely indicate The Glory continues to be praised globally, maybe even more following the release of part 2. So many good reviews from both the audience and the critics, including you. Now, what's behind such high ratings?
I mean, there's a lot of things that work about The Glory. Obviously, it's a good story, and at the heart of that, we have a very good revenge story. Korea has been, particularly good at making revenge stories over the years, and compared to a lot of their other content, the revenge stories are the ones that have clicked internationally. I mean, the first, Korean content that really caused a massive stir all around the world, particularly in the West, was Park Chan-wook's Old Boy, a classic Korean revenge story, and other films like that, like Lady Vengeance, have also done very well. On top of that, we have the school bullying, which people have been talking about a lot. School bullying is a theme that appears a lot in Korean media. It's sadly it's a big problem in Korea, and it's vividly portrayed in the show. And other shows have done it, like All of Us Are Dead last year, another big hit. But I don't think that really dealt with the school bullying in a very it had a kind of a murky message about it. But The Glory is a more cathartic experience, and it's good for viewers, people who've experienced that. Everyone's really responded to that. And it's also just a great mix of a kind of soapy melodrama and strong adult themes. There's sex and violence in there that's very cleverly folded in to make it an exciting, sort of a forbidden experience for a lot of people as well. But you also have all the emotional relationships between Song Hye-kyo's character Moon Dong-un and her helper, played by Yeon-Kishida, or her kind of plastic surgeon love interest, played by Lee Do-hyun, and the various kind of relationships between mothers and their children. So much there for audiences to kind of get into, and it's not hard to see why it's done so well internationally.
Right, it's a good mixture of different genres, and also a lot of messages embedded in just one drama, like you mentioned.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you for your time this morning.
My pleasure.
For a look at the news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley joining us here in the studio. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning, Dami.
So we're starting in Poland. Poland has become the first NATO member to pledge to send some of its fighter jets to Ukraine.
Well, that is right. Speaking at a press conference on Thursday, Polish President Andrzej Duda promised to send Soviet-era MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine. This to assist in its defense against Russia. Now, the leader said that Poland will send 4 aircraft in the next few days, with more to follow after they undergo maintenance. However, the total number of aircraft being supplied is not yet known. Poland's move comes after repeated requests for 4 fighter jets from Kyiv and marks a break away from the stance taken by other NATO members not to supply warplanes. Now, several NATO allies have already promised to send tanks to the war-torn country. We turn our attention to France now, as its government has pushed through a controversial pension reform. French President Emmanuel Macron on Thursday ordered his prime minister to invoke special constitutional powers, and this to pass the reform without a parliamentary vote. Now, the proposal was cleared earlier in the day in the French Senate and was set to be voted on in the National Assembly, where it was not expected to pass, prompting the intervention from Macron. Now, the pension reform will raise France's retirement age from 62 to 64, and this will be starting in 2027. The government says the measure is needed to address a pension funding deficit. Now, following the move, police clashed with protesters in Paris, with tear gas used to disperse crowds in the Place de la Concorde. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom has banned TikTok from government-issued devices over security concerns. Announced by the British government on Thursday local time, the ban took place with immediate effect. The move follows similar bans by the United States, the European Union and Canada. These bans come as TikTok has faced increasing scrutiny over allegations that it collects users' private data for use by the Chinese government. TikTok has denied sharing information with Chinese officials. Meanwhile, a report from the Wall Street Journal claims a U.S. committee has threatened a potential nationwide ban of the app unless Chinese owners sell their stakes in the company. The White House has not confirmed or denied the report. And finally, Saudi Arabia's inaugural Camel Cup comes to a close on Friday, with its winner expected to walk away with a grand prize of $21 million. Taking place in the kingdom's oasis city of Al Alua, the 4-day camel racing event kicked off on Tuesday. Races have been taking place every day from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. in a bid to avoid the desert heat. Organized by the Saudi Camel Racing Federation, the event has drawn in teams of racers and camel breeders from around the world. Apart from races, those attending the Camel Cup can also experience cultural events and exhibitions. These detail the sport's history in the region.
Good morning. There's a chill in the air this morning again. Morning temperatures are similar to the same time yesterday, dropping below 0 in some inland areas, but highs will jump more than 10 degrees from the daily lows. Meanwhile, a dry air advisory has been expanded to pretty much everywhere except on Jeju and the south coast, where rain is expected today. Also, the Korea Forest Service has raised its wildfire warning to the second highest level today. Be careful with anything that could cause a spark, and remember, 1/3 of wildfires are caused by hikers. Here are some ways to boost indoor humidity as the level is as low as 20% these days. The ideal humidity level is 40 to 60% around this time. Back to the readings. Unlike yesterday, those in the south will notice afternoon highs going down a few notches, while central regions will see higher daytime highs. Rain on Jeju and South Coast continues through tomorrow. The rest of the country remains dry with more up and down temperatures. That's Korea for you. Here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. We'll be back next week for our Monday's edition at the same time. Happy Friday!